I knew these people.
What people?
These two people. They were in love with each other. The girl was very young, about 17 or 18, I guess. And the guy was quite a bit older. And he was kind of raggedy and wild.
These are the opening lines of the greatest scene ever put to film. Of course, that's a very subjective claim to make, but for me, the writing and execution of this interaction impacted me in a way that no other film has. It's a confession of two very broken people addressing the marred remnants of a relationship and a family that once was. Their names are Travis and Jane. Before we begin unpacking the nuances of this scene, from Sam Shepard's dialogue to the importance of color and everything in between, we need to back up a bit. Released in 1984, Paris, Texas is the masterpiece that followed the collaboration between German director Wim Wenders and American playwright Sam Shepard.
Ce film-là, plus que d'autres films, a vraiment commencé avec des rêves, et pas des rêves de faire d'argent, de gagner beaucoup d'argent. Ça a commencé avec des rêves de collaboration. Depuis longtemps, j'ai voulu travailler sur quelque chose avec Sam Shepard, que j'admire beaucoup.
Shepard's love for the West, growing up in rural Southern California as a ranch hand, met Wenders' admiration for America. The overlapping of these paths is where Paris, Texas was born.
Moi, j'ai reconnu dans son rêve mon propre rêve, bien que le mien c'était toujours un rêve d'un Européen.
The story that grew from this dream is one of relationship. It's rich with poetic dialogue and breathtaking cinematography. It's simple and methodical, allowing viewers to sink into the emotional weight of every scenario and cling to every word. Additionally, the story follows a very linear path. For that reason, in order to lay the foundation for the scene we're going to discuss, I want to run you through the events that take place up until the climax where our scene occurs. When a man starts to run from something, he's motivated by enlarging the gap between himself and the problem. But after weeks, months, and eventually years, the man may wander so far from the problem that he begins to find motivation in the simple act of continuing on. Refusing to let his mind linger on the past, he becomes numb to it, filling the empty space between his ears with the sound of his own footsteps. This is where we find Travis at the start of the film. Scruffy, weathered, and taciturn, Travis marches on in the eternal sunshine of day. For 4 years, Travis has lived like this, but eventually his brother Walt receives word of his whereabouts and goes to retrieve his estranged brother.
Don't you recognize me? It's Walt!
Reluctantly, Travis takes his eyes off the beckoning horizon and takes his first step forward in 4 years. With the sun setting and a storm brewing, the reunited brothers drive to a motel, marking the end of Travis's exodus. Travis's first words are fragmented and brief, making him appear childish and timid.
Did you ever go to Paris?
No?
Could we go there now?
A naivete that drastically changes by the end of the film.
They were always laughing at stupid things. He liked to make her laugh.
Driving across the American West, he slowly begins to open up and reassume the life he abandoned for so long.
Eating and talking. Before you know it, you'll be back in the land of the living, Trav.
When the brothers arrive in LA, they're greeted by Walt's wife Anne and Travis's 7-year-old son, Hunter.
Hi.
Hi.
Hunter was just 3 years old when Travis was ripped from his life. All that he has to remember his father by is some film shot a long time ago
In a galaxy far, far away.
some utopic time when Travis and Jane were still together, happy, in love. Travis initially struggles to connect with Hunter, but his sincerity and effort eventually pays off.
How can I have two fathers? Just lucky, I guess. Well, bye. Bye.
With father and son back together, the implicit question then rises to the surface: what happened to Jane, and where is she now? Here, the film takes a significant shift. Armed with the location of a bank Jane frequents every month, Hunter and Travis hit the road to Houston, Texas.
I want to find her too. When do we go?
Right now.
Now, come on, let's go.
Against all odds, they locate and follow Jane's car to a peep show club where she works. Travis and Jane have just 2 interactions in the whole film, both of which occur in the booths at the peep show. On his first visit, Travis sees Jane for the first time in 4 years. Tears flood his eyes as she speaks, but he's unable to tell her everything he wants to.
You know, I know how hard it is to talk to strangers sometimes.
Travis retreats and starts the long drive back, but he knows what has to be done. Slamming on the brakes, they make a pit stop at a bar and spend the night in town.
Travis folgt dem Jungen. Der macht ja alle Entscheidungen praktisch, der Kleine. Bis auf die Entscheidung, wo Travis dann auf die Bremse tritt und zurückfährt. Das ist seine eigene Entscheidung. Und da weiß er ja dann schon, dass er wegen des Jungen zurückfährt und nicht für sich. Weil das will die Vergangenheit zwar in Ordnung bringen, aber er weiß, der Preis, den er dafür zahlen muss, ist, dass er aus ihr austritt, aus der Familie.
The next morning, they go back to Houston, back to Jane.
Love, Dad.
As Travis drives off to the club once more, he leaves Hunter a voice recording.
But the biggest thing I hoped for can't come true. You belong together with your mother. It was me that tore you apart, and I owe it to you to bring you back together.
Travis knows that bringing Hunter and Jane back together will only do more damage so long as he's still there. From the very start, he's longed for the 3 of them to be together the way they used to be, but now he recognizes that his dream can't come true. Travis needs to let go of his own desires so Hunter and Jane can have each other.
Das war ein eigenartiges Kapitel in dieser Herstellungsgeschichte von Paris, Texas, weil Sam und ich uns unserer Sache so sicher waren, dass wir genau das Richtige gefunden hatten für uns beide, die richtigen Schauspieler, waren wir dann so überheblich zu sagen, wir brauchen gar kein Drehbuch zu Ende zu schreiben.
To a large degree, the success of Paris, Texas can be directly traced to Sam Shepard's screenplay. His collection of poems, ponderings, and short stories called Motel Chronicles acted as inspiration for many of the scenes in the film. His life experience is directly infused in the heart of the film, so when Shepard got tied up in another project during filming, Wenders found himself in a bind.
Nach der Hälfte des Films hatte ich kein Drehbuch mehr. Der hatte seinen Sohn gefunden und jetzt stand ich da ohne Autor und auch ohne Drehbuch.
With the help of Kit Carson, Wenders was able to keep the film progressing, but they eventually arrived at the peep show scene. Wenders came up with the concept, but knowing the significance the scene held, he knew that Shepard had to write it. There was no other option.
Hat Sam mir in einer Nacht, von 12 Uhr nachts bis morgens früh um 6, die Piepshow-Szene durchs Telefon durchgegeben.
In perhaps the most unconventional way possible, Shepard delivered. Without that single phone call and Shepard's acute understanding of Travis and Jane as characters, well, I wouldn't be making this video.
Hi. Can I tell you something?
Sure. Anything you like.
It's kind of long.
I got plenty of time.
We now find ourselves in a different booth for Travis's second and final visit. The following interaction is the focal point of the movie, marking the last stop on Travis's journey. It serves to clarify what really happened between Travis and Jane those 4 years ago, and it's the emotional crux of the entire film. The scene can be broken down into 2 parts, Travis's monologue and Jane's response. Going chronologically, let's start with Travis. After ensuring that Jane can't see him through the window, Travis turns his chair around and begins to speak into the phone. His monologue tells the story of a relationship between 2 people from its very start to its tumultuous end. Of course, Travis is telling his own personal story, and Jane is the other woman. In the early days, Travis loved Jane more than he ever felt possible. He loved her so much that he would only work when the money had completely run out. That way they could always be together. Eventually, she began to worry about money, and Travis started to go crazy.
He started thinking that she was seeing other men on the sly. He'd come home from work and accuse her of spending the day with somebody else. He'd yell at her and break things in the trailer.
Travis started drinking and testing Jane, staying out late in hopes that she would get jealous of him.
He wanted her to get jealous, but she didn't. She just worried about him. But that got him even madder.
This destructive cycle went on until months into her pregnancy, Jane told Travis they were having a child. Travis, now feeling secure in Jane's commitment to him, resolved to change his bad habits. He dedicated himself to preparing a home for Jane and their little boy.
But a funny thing started to happen.
What?
He didn't even notice it at first. She started to change. From the day the baby was born, she began to get irritated with everything around her. She got mad at everything. Even the baby seemed to be an injustice to her. He kept trying to make everything all right for her, but nothing seemed to satisfy her.
For 2 years, Travis tried to put things back the way they used to be at the start, but eventually, he gave up. It was never going to work out. Travis started drinking again and became abusive, while Jane became enraged at him. She tried to run away, but Travis dragged her back, tying her to the stove with his belt.
He just left her there and went back to bed. I lay there listening to her scream. And for the first time, he wished he were far away, lost in a deep, vast country where nobody knew him, somewhere without language or streets.
When he woke up, the trailer was engulfed in flames. Jane and Hunter were gone. So, he just ran.
He ran until the sun came up, and he couldn't run any further. And when the sun went down, he ran again.
Harry Dean Stanton insisted that his 10-minute monologue be shot in one take. For 48 hours straight, he and Nastassja Kinski memorized the lines that Sam Shepard gave vendors over the phone, and with every take, they started on a fresh roll of film. Travis finishes his confession of sorts and asks,
If you turn the light off in there, will you be able to see me?
With less than 15 minutes remaining in the film, Jane looks into Travis's eyes for the first time in 4 years. Travis tells her that Hunter's waiting for her back in the hotel room.
I didn't want to use him to fill all my emptiness.
Well, he needs you now, Jane. And he wants to see you.
He does?
Travis nearly leaves right there, but Jane has a lot on her mind that she needs to tell him. Facing her back to him, just as he did, the baton is passed to Jane. In her much shorter dialogue, Jane tells Travis about her past experience being apart from him. Often she would speak to him as if he was right there with her.
We'd have long conversations. The two of us. Then I couldn't picture you anymore.
Eventually, the memory of him faded, and she was left completely on her own. When she started working at the Peep Show, however, she started imagining that Travis was every man on the other side of the mirror.
Every man has your voice.
Travis reminds her of the hotel where Hunter will be expecting her, and leaves. Jane's response, though brief, is equally if not more packed with emotion. She doesn't need to add or contest anything that Travis spoke, because he spoke with sincerity and truth. She simply wanted to communicate to him the pain she experienced in the aftermath. Most importantly, the pain that she admits to isn't anguish from festering emotional wounds that Travis afflicted, rather it's longing. His absence left a gaping hole, and despite their past, Jane shows a willingness to reconnect.
So hat also Sam doch den Film zu Ende geschrieben, muss ich sagen. Weil diese Dialoge das ist ja letztendlich dann der Film, wie die beiden sich dann treffen. Bis dahin habe ich Holter die Polter irgendwie mich über die Runden gekämpft. Und dann hat Sam ganz glorreich das doch nochmal mir geliefert.
As it is a very straightforward scene, the dialogue is truly what makes it so spectacular. This scene is single-handedly responsible for bringing the film together. It's the key to answering every question about Travis and Jane's relationship up to this point. So now that we know 1, what was said, and 2, why it all matters in the context of the film, let's shift into talking about the specific strategies used by the filmmakers to elevate the themes of the scene and make it truly stellar. The first technique is in the camera itself. more specifically in framing and physical positioning. As Travis's monologue grows increasingly personal and piercing, the camera moves closer and closer to Jane, starting with an obstructed over-the-shoulder shot and arriving at a clean close-up shot. On its own, this seems like pretty standard filmmaking, but there's one key detail in the set that gives new meaning to these approaching camera movements. There's a wall between them. A physical barrier with a one-way window allowing Travis to see inside, while Jane sees only her reflection. This wall represents the emotional barrier that has grown between them over the past 4 years. At the start of the interaction, Jane is framed with a large percentage of the wall still in the shot. The visible reminder of their separation is clear and present. We'll call this level 1. As Travis continues at this level, slight glances of Jane's eyes and twitches of her brow let the audience know that this story is familiar to her, but surely it's all just a big coincidence.
He couldn't stand being away from her during the day when he went to work.
The next time we cut back to Jane, the window frame is absent, and we just see her, unobstructed. This is level 2. As these visual obstacles are removed and the shots get tighter, the audience can visually experience Travis's words penetrating the barrier between them. The shots continue at level 2 up until Travis mentions the trailer.
He started thinking that she was seeing other men on the sly. He'd come home from work and accuse her of spending the day with somebody else. He'd yell at her and break things in the trailer.
At this particular line, the camera itself moves inside Jane's booth, beyond the glass. Travis's words have shattered the barrier. Here we can see a glisten in her eye highlighted from the false window.
The trailer.
For the first time in the scene, the camera flips around and we see what Jane sees. It hangs on this shot for 17 seconds. The audience is allowed to experience Travis's words from Jane's perspective. From this side, we see the exposed insulation on the wall between them, symbolizing the hastiness or lack of care with which it was erected. This directly applies to the emotional state of the couple's separation. From the outside, everything might look flawless, but in reality, the wounds never healed, the conflicts weren't resolved, and the pain wasn't addressed. When Travis and Jane were running from each other, their resentment and lack of communication were the wood and nails to build an emotional wall.
He thought if she never got jealous of him that she didn't really care about him. Jealousy was a sign of her love for him.
The next increment forward is found when Travis brings up jealousy. After a brief hiatus on levels 1 and 2, this line causes the camera to shoot back through the glass, the tightest in on Jane's face that we've been yet. The fourth and final level. With her lip quivering and her breath irregular, Jane is sure now. The woman in the story is her, and the man hidden behind her own reflection is Travis, the father of her child, and the man she used to love. The intensity provided by this camera movement helps pinpoint Travis's jealousy as a defining factor in the couple's contentions. Through Vender's direction, audiences are able to infer greater detail in the story than would have otherwise been available.
20 minutes later, the phone rang. I hadn't heard from this guy in years. And I hear this whoosh on the telephone, long-distance telephone. Hello, this is Vim. That's sentence number 1. I said, hey, Vim, we're just talking about you. What are you doing? Well, I made a film. That's sentence number 2. Uh-huh. Yeah. And he says, yeah, I'd like you to do the music. It's great.
Perhaps one of the most integral parts of Paris, Texas, is the original soundtrack by Ry Cooder. It's sparse but impossible to forget. His slide guitar work evokes lingering emotions of sadness and nostalgia that are inextricable from the shots they accompany.
Pour moi, c'était jamais quelque chose ajouté à un film. Et alors, je crois pas qu'on peut dire utiliser parce qu'on dit on utilise des paysages, on utilise des hommes et des femmes. La musique, c'est aussi bien le sujet de ces films que, disons, les paysages. Ou c'est aussi important que les histoires de ces personnages. La musique est un personnage central.
For the first half of Travis's monologue, the absence of his voice is met with silence and the occasional sniffle. However, at a certain moment, about halfway through, a guitar slowly fades into the background.
And he was going to dedicate himself to funny things started to happen.
What?
She started to change. He kept trying to make everything all right for her, but nothing seemed to satisfy her.
This moment in the story marks the shift in Jane's character. It's the final high point of the relationship before everything falls down the slippery slope. What follows is nothing but drunkenness, anger, and dreams of being free from it all. The soundtrack juxtaposes the abusiveness of the relationship through to its fiery collapse. The music, soft and hopeful, takes this story and places it in a time long ago. It emphasizes the disparity between who Travis and Jane were then and who they are now. At the same time, it conveys a purity and sincerity in Travis as he voluntarily confesses to the damage and life-altering pain he caused. He has nothing to hide, and he doesn't hold on to any of that rage anymore.
If you turn the light off in there, will you be able to see me?
I never tried.
Do you recognize me?
This moment after Travis's monologue is where Jane first looks into Travis's eyes. Turning the light off so her own reflection doesn't get in the way, the voice beyond the glass becomes real. She's seeing Travis for who he truly is, the way she would have looked at him when they first met. So what does turning the lights off have anything to do with this? Throughout the film, color takes on various connotations, and as we know, there is no color if there is no light. Vibrant reds symbolize love, anger, and disconnection. For example, look at the first Peep booth scene. Red phone, red table, red lamp, red couch, not to mention both characters' clothes. The dominating presence of red emphasizes the 4 years of disconnect between Travis and Jane. Green often symbolizes unfamiliarity with the familiar. For example, with the German doctor in South Texas, a green light floods the room, creating the feeling of a foreign environment in that which should have been familiar. Again, this can be applied to Jane and Hunter reuniting in the hotel. Jane wears a green dress, and the green lights from neighboring buildings shine through the windows. For a fleeting moment, her own son, someone she once knew through and through, is a stranger to her. Other colors like yellow and blue often are seen representing ideas of family and freedom. There's a lot more, but that's sufficient. These colors have history, containing past emotions and memories within them. As people live their lives, colors don specific connotations, and that doesn't just fade away. Similarly, in Travis and Jane's relationship, and in the film as a whole, color and the history it carries persists through time. Jane and Travis view each other through various lenses of color, layers of assumptions and past emotions that change how they view each other and morph the true image of the person beneath. This is why Travis first sees Jane surrounded by red. Not only is it a representation of the way he perceives her, the disconnect, the unknown of Travis's anger or love, ultimately shown to be love, but it also shows how Jane has been holding on to the past, carrying these colors with her wherever she goes. When Travis and Jane meet in the booth for the second time, the vibrant reds and pinks have been replaced with neutral tones. Without the colors that have defined the film up to this point, the following conversation is presented as a blank canvas. When the lights are voluntarily turned off, Travis and Jane are letting go of the past with its reds, blues, greens, and yellows, and instead look to the future. Imagine taking off a pair of 3D glasses. By approaching each other open-mindedly, they can see each other for who they really are. So where does the conversation lead when the glasses are off? It leads back to Hunter. Hunter represents the future of this family, and restoring the bond between mother and son is Travis's only remaining motivation. The simplicity with which this scene is able to convey such heartbreaking emotion is what really sets it apart for me. The daunting task of filling in the gaping holes of Travis and Jane's relationship was executed flawlessly. It never feels hurried or forced, and ultimately it leaves the audience satisfied knowing what happened, and in greater measure, it leaves them heartbroken. It gives just the right amount of space to sink into the dialogue and experience the tragedy of the story as it's being told. Whether it be Harry Dean and Nastassja Kinski's performance, Sam Shepard's writing, Wim Wenders' direction, Ry Cooder's score, or any other number of factors, the passion that went into this scene is undeniable. That passion, combined with a serendipitous collision of ideas, paid off, resulting in what I think is the greatest scene in cinema. The film concludes with Travis driving off into the sunset, into the vast unknown once again. But this time, he isn't running. He's saying goodbye. He fulfilled his purpose to reunite the people he loved, so now he fixes his eyes on the horizon once again.
Eigentlich ein Verzicht, ne? Er verzichtet ja darauf teilzuhaben, an der Familie, an dem Glück. Er verabschiedet sich ja am Schluss aus der Geschichte und aus dem Leben dieser anderen beiden, um für die beiden das, was sie zu dritt nicht erreichen können, zumindest für die beiden das herzustellen.
Travis doesn't get a happy ending. When he used to walk the train tracks, I like to imagine Travis saw himself as one side of the rail and Jane as the other, running parallel to him. Looking out far into the distance, one might be convinced that the two rails touch at the horizon. So Travis kept walking, hoping that one day he might eventually reunite with Jane. In time, their paths got very close, but one single wall kept them apart, and the tracks continued on side by side into the horizon.
Les États-Unis qui parlent de l'Amérique. Je crois que celui-là, Paris-Texas, parce que j'ai tout pu faire ce que j'ai voulu faire depuis longtemps, tu vois. C'est rarement qu'on a un sentiment comme ça après un film, qu'on a vraiment pu faire ce qu'on voulait, tu vois. Ça arrive pas si souvent quand on se dit à la fin, bon, c'est bien ça exactement ce que j'ai voulu faire.